Welcome to a very special edition of This Week in Missouri Politics. As you can see, we're not in our normal studios in St. Louis. We're broadcasting from the state capitol in Jefferson City, and we're joined by the man that's been in the headlines more than any other person in Jeff City this session, Senator Bob Onder.
Great
Senator,
to see you, Scott.
Thank you
Good
so
to be
much
on.
for welcoming us to your office here in the Capitol, and welcome
you.
back to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Oh, it's great to be back.
I'm very interested to just ask you, with SGR 39, the thing that's been discussed, everybody's tried to define it. You're the person that authored it. Tell us what you were trying to do with SGR 39.
So yeah, SGR 39, if approved by the people, would give them the opportunity to protect religious liberty in this state as regards to sincerely held religious beliefs about marriage. The background, of course, is the June 2015 Supreme Court decision about Obergefell, which declared that there is a fundamental right for same-sex couples to marry. Well, the way I put it is just like after Roe versus Wade in 1973, the Supreme Court ruled that there's a fundamental right to abortion, but yet the question remained, what is the right of doctors and nurses who didn't want to participate in abortion? What are conscience rights? And of course, it was decided over the next few years that there is a right of conscience not to participate in abortion. And conscience rights are well established in our tradition, American legal tradition, the draft, the death penalty. We don't force people to do things that violate their conscience, especially their religious beliefs. Amish Mennonites are not compelled to be drafted. So SGR 39 sought to protect pastors, religious organizations, churches, and some very limited business people, those in the wedding industry, from being punished by government for their sincerely held religious beliefs about marriage.
When you drafted this, did some of the folks in these industries come to you with these concerns? What initially made you think this was important enough to put in the Constitution?
So first of all, it was precipitated by the U.S. Supreme Court's really radical redefinition of marriage. Of course, it's radical because 30 states actually had in their Constitution the definition of marriage between one man and one woman. But there were cases around the country where gay rights laws and ordinances were being used to persecute people of faith who refused to be commandeered into same-sex marriage ceremonies. Likewise, even the Obama's lawyer, the Solicitor General Donald Verrilli, when asked on oral argument about the tax-exempt status of churches that didn't marry gays, would that be threatened? Verrilli said, yes, that is something we'll have to look at. And there are universities that have had their accreditation threatened by the state because of their position.
You think one of the main reasons why this was a challenge is because there's no one in Missouri that's been affected negatively by this yet?
I think that's right. We were trying to get ahead of it so that Missourians wouldn't be punished, wouldn't be punished the way, say, Melissa Klein in Oregon, who refused to be compelled to use her services as a baker to participate in a same-sex wedding. She was sued $135,000 by the state of Oregon and literally sued out of business. She and her husband lost their business and are in bankruptcy because she refused to violate her religious conscience. You're right, Scott. We didn't have a case like that in Missouri to point to.
Do you believe
and that's part of the challenge.
Do you believe that in the interim, in the 7 months, that if there's a person who earnestly is in the church directory, who has a tax statement where they've tithed, that was classy, that tried to encourage this couple to go to other florists or bakers, and they get sued and they come to Jeff City, I personally believe this bill passes in 6 weeks as a statute, right?
Well, I think that may be. I don't know, Scott, but that was one of our challenges. We were trying to protect Missourians before nightmare scenarios like that happened, and we weren't able to point to that person being punished by the iron fist of government the way it's happened around the country.
One of the surprises about this was the business community.
Big surprise.
You're known as one of, if not the biggest supporter of business causes in the state Senate. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I received the Freshman of the Year award from the Missouri Chamber of Commerce for my pro-business stands. I'm a limited government, economic liberty, pro-economic development Republican. So, of course, it was surprising because, after all, this was a First Amendment issue, a religious liberty issue. Quite frankly, what a company like, let us say Monsanto, their customers are farmers. Their customers in Missouri are the 100,000 farmers who are members of the Missouri Farm Bureau. That Farm Bureau endorsed my amendment, and yet Monsanto was one of the biggest opponents to my bill. So that was a big surprise, Scott, and of course a big disappointment.
So kind of looking behind the scenes on this, it looked to people that observed the Capitol that either some of the supporters of this didn't communicate with the business community, or the business community didn't communicate with the supporters of this effort. I noticed in the Senate there was very little opposition from the business community. It all kind of came after the filibuster, and in the House. Can you give us some insight on where that breakdown in communication existed?
So I filed the bill in March. It was noticed up just like any other bill. And in the hearing for my bill, there were only not a single business group, not a single business testified against my group. The only two groups that testified against my bill were PROMO, which is a gay rights group, and the ACLU. And we did have some discussions with the Missouri Chamber, AT&T prior to the bill, but really not very much. And honestly, the couple of reservations that the Chamber expressed were pretty tepid and not well founded. And so it was disappointing when you're not engaged early in the process and then they sandbag you later in the process. That was disappointing.
The 40-hour filibuster
Yes.
ends in a PQ.
Yes.
Most view that as a failure of the Senate when they can't come to a compromise. Looking back on that, can you give our viewers any insight into the negotiations that went on behind the scenes?
Well, I would say about the PQ in general, we in the Missouri Senate, I think more than in most legislatures, give the minority party a very free rein in free and fair debate. By and large, the filibuster is very much respected. The minority party is given almost always unlimited time to debate and express their view given the opportunity to negotiate. But the counterbalance to that, there always have to be checks and balances in government, is the PQ. So I don't think we apologize for using it. Now during that 40-hour filibuster, 26 of those hours, the minority party had the floor tied up with a single amendment that they did something called third degreeing, where no one could offer amendments, and they never allowed a vote on that amendment. In 26 hours, they could have offered 26 amendments, 30
Some
amendments.
of the leading senators in the minority have said they wish they would have done a few things differently.
I agree.
Do you wish you'd have done some things differently that night?
Sure. There's always, especially when you're very tired after not sleeping for 40 straight hours, you wish you had done things differently. But I really think at the end of the day, it needed to be done. We needed to end the debate, to move on, to get to a vote, and that's how it ended up.
So, last question on this. The business community has opposed something you've done. You're one of their biggest defenders and promoters. They're some of your biggest supporters.
Absolutely.
However the end of this issue is, whether it's back next session, whether it's done and wrapped up, will you be able to come back together with the business community and join on the 99.9% of things you work on now?
At the hearing on the House side, Lieutenant Governor Kinder was asked the question, what do you make about the business opposition to this bill? Of course, Peter Kinder was a big supporter of SJR 39, and he said, I reserve the right to disagree with my friends. So I'm sure I'll be working with my friends in the business community on many other issues, the rest of this session and the next session as well.
Great. Well, we'll be right back for a second part. Instead of an opinion maker panel, we're going to dig into some of the other issues in Missouri politics with Senator Onder. But first, we'll leave you with this week's leading Missouri economic indicators. Welcome back. We want to now point to, we were just talking in the last segment about the business community and your deep
Yes.
relationship with them. Let's talk about some of the stuff you're doing this session
Right.
with the business community.
Right.
TIF reform was one of the things we'd mentioned?
Yeah, one of the things I'm working on with the business community, as well as the counties, the school districts, a number of different stakeholders in the St. Louis metro area, is on TIF reform. As you know, Scott, TIFs started as tax increment financing, started as a well-intentioned economic development tool where a portion of an increase in tax revenue of a project could be dedicated toward the costs of doing that project. And in theory, that's a great idea. The idea was to redevelop blighted areas in the inner city. And what's turned out it's evolved into, degraded into over the years, is a way of moving retail around rather than the original purpose of redeveloping blight. So I filed a TIF reform bill this year. Has bipartisan support. Sure. I've worked with Senator Gina Walsh on that. Senator Andrew Koenig is my sponsor in the House.
The House seems where that's normally been the graveyard for these bills. They seem receptive this session.
They have been, and they've already passed it by an overwhelming margin. On this side of the building, I've worked with Senator Walsh on this bill. She's been a champion of it in the past. Back in the day, Senator Steve Ailman, now our county executive, worked with some of the Democrat members on the issue as well. Andrew Koenig points out that Walmart has used TIFs to move Walmarts 3 times down Manchester Road in his district. Now, what that does is not just a waste of resources, but in the St. Louis metro area, it's taken $5.8 billion over the last 2 decades away from our school systems, our ambulance districts, our fire districts, and really without appreciably increasing jobs or economic development. So the bill would bring TIFs back to their original purpose, where if municipalities overruled the TIF commission, there could still be a TIF, but it would just be to bring the property back to greenfield condition. In other words, to remediate the blight, but not to be used for other costs of the project.
You've been a leader on some legislation that's kind of neat. When you think about serving in the legislature, when you were in the House, who would have ever thought an Uber would exist? I mean, it didn't exist.
No, it didn't.
Talk about the legislation you're doing regarding regulating Uber.
Yeah, so right now, taxis in most of the big cities in our state and in our country are regulated by these archaic systems of taxi cab commissions that issue licenses or medallions. It's really a very regulated monopoly in which competition is really strictly stifled. Uber and Lyft have just revolutionized the transportation industry, where I think a lot of your listeners have probably used Uber or Lyft. You get on your phone,
Have you used Uber?
I've used it, yeah. You get on your phone, you ask for a driver, and the driver on the other end gets matched up with you. And this is a tremendous gain for the consumer. It's generally is less expensive. It's more convenient. It's really not that much a threat to the taxi cab drivers, because by and large there is a shortage of taxis.
Well, don't you think the taxi cabs probably begin to be more like Uber?
Yeah, and in fact they are already starting to do that. They're developing their own apps, so the Uber-like apps, and so exactly. So it creates better customer service. The consumer wins. And in addition, Senator Nasheed, Senator Chappelle Nadal, both Democrats, see that as a great opportunity for employment gains in their community, where some of their constituents can work part-time as Uber or Lyft drivers. So it's really estimated that this can create over 10,000 generally part-time jobs in the state of Missouri and really give people economic opportunity.
Let's talk about a couple other issues before the legislature.
Yeah.
The Senate has on the calendar, rising up towards the top, a bill that would redefine how the energy sector is regulated in the state.
Yes.
Where's that bill at, and does it pass?
Yeah, so that is a very that's a very big, very complicated.
Could be the most
bill.
complex bill of the session, right?
There's no question, and it just came out of committee 2-3 weeks ago. I think it's on like its 9th iteration, and it's aimed to balance a number of interests. It's aimed to kind of take care of the issues that Noranda has with the declining aluminum prices, and Noranda being in bankruptcy. Of course, Noranda is the biggest customer of Ameren. It's aiming to establish a fair rate-making structure with caps, at the same time balance the interests of consumers and electrical utilities. And I think it has strong supporters, but it also has strong opponents. I think anytime you have 10 days left in session and those sort of interests competing, I'm not sure it gets across the line.
Interesting.
Scott.
You know, we hear a lot about trade deals, and Donald Trump's brought a lot of that to the fore.
Yeah.
I think in South Missouri you did see how the Obama administration just refusing to protect the aluminum industry let China run them out of business. And now the state Senate's trying to do some things piecemeal, but isn't the real solution. You have to have a president that'll stand up for America.
That's right, Scott. You know, look, I'm a free market guy. I'm a free trader, but quite frankly, China cheats. They cheat.
Well, yeah, free trade is not a suicide pact, right? I mean,
precisely. Good way of putting it, Scott. And really, honestly, China manipulates currency. China dumps aluminum. They subsidize exports, all in violation of numerous international trade compacts. And Obama absolutely refuses to protect
well, let's
our
talk
domestic
politics.
Industry.
So in the Missouri primary, do you have a favorite?
In the Missouri Republican
for the president.
gubernatorial. Oh, yes, I am a Cruz guy.
Committed Cruz guy? Are you part of the Never Trump group? Or?
So no, I'm not part of the Never Trump group. No, I endorsed Ted Cruz a couple of months ago. I was originally a Scott Walker guy, but he was the first out when his numbers hit 0.5%. It wasn't long for this world, and I then endorsed. And then about 2 months ago, I endorsed Ted Cruz. But no, am I a Never Trump guy? No. I think if Donald Trump is our nominee, I'll support him all the way.
You've been through primaries. You've been some tough ones. You've won some, lost some.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for the will of the voters, right?
Oh yeah,
whether you're on the winning side or losing side.
In 2008, after a tough primary, Blaine Luetkemeyer came out on top. I came out second out of 5 folks. I supported Blaine. I support him to this day.
Well, will you be going to the convention in Cleveland?
I think I probably will be. That'll be determined on Wednesday at the Congressional District Convention, but I will be on a slate for that convention.
Oh, as a delegate?
As a delegate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So if they get there and Trump looks like he'll have the most delegates by a decent margin,
right?
But he doesn't quite get there,
right?
What happens?
So what will happen is the same thing that has happened 5 or 6 times in the history of the Republican Party. That there will be an open convention. Now, Donald's a pretty good deal maker, so if he's 50, 100 votes short of 1237, I think he could very well make the deal to make up the difference and become the nominee, even though he doesn't win on the first ballot. As you know, of course, the delegates are committed on the first ballot.
Is the 2nd Congressional District committed to Trump or to Cruz, or is it split?
So 2nd and 3rd are both committed to. I live in the 3rd, so the 2nd and 3rd are both committed to Trump on the first ballot. You know, in 1960, of course, you remember Seward's Folly, the Alaska Purchase. William Seward went into the convention with the majority of delegates. So on the first round, Seward won, but didn't get his magic number. Second round,
electing someone other than the leader going to the convention.
Well, in 1960, the 3rd round was won by Abraham Lincoln. There's never been the rule that the person with the plurality of delegates is automatically the nominee. The closest we've come in recent history is that Jerry Ford in 1976 went into the convention without the majority, or I don't know what the number was back then, but today is 1237, and Ronald Reagan did his best to beat him out. Didn't quite make it.
One thing Trump's done is brought new people into the Republican Party.
He has.
I mean, the numbers show new people have pulled the Republican ballot. Do you think that the caucus structure, a little bit like Florida, right? The voting system in Florida was fine until it was razor thin, and that showed some problems. With it being this close, do you think this caucus system's a little cumbersome and maybe outdated?
Well, there's no question. The caucus system is hard for the average voter to understand. That's for sure.
Why not make it easy?
Yeah. I think it could use some revamping, but it has been well over 100 years that we have had this system of delegates from caucuses selecting nominees. But I think it needs to be revisited. Scott.
Maybe an Uberization of the caucus system.
There you go. Maybe so. Maybe we could do it from our smartphone apps.
Let's talk about the governor's race, some of these statewide races.
Yeah.
The governor's race, who are you supporting?
Yeah, I have not picked a horse in that race. I have too many friends in that race.
Sure.
I've known 3 of the 4 candidates for many years, and are good friends. And I'm at this point officially staying out.
It was the governor's race kind of came into this SGR 39 debate when Eric Greitens kind of took what most people thought was a pretty unconventional position.
Yeah.
But did it make sense to you? I mean, it's not a break from who he is, right?
Well, again, Eric has. I've known Catherine since my 20s in Young Republicans. I've known Peter for well over a decade. I've known John Brunner for a long time. I really don't know Eric all that well, so I don't know who he is. I guess he is running as a little bit more of a moderate, so maybe the SGR 39 is his coming out against religious liberty amendment wasn't all that big a surprise, but I don't understand someone in a Republican primary coming out against letting Missouri voters vote for religious liberty.
So what do you think will be important in July to voters? What will be the messaging we hear to the Republican primary electorate? And can you put your political scientist hat on and tell us who do you think's in the lead right now?
In the
primary for governor.
In the primary for governor, I think probably you can never estimate the importance of name recognition in politics. Sure. So I think the couple of polls I have seen seem to give Peter Kinder an edge on that front. But I don't. I think there are a lot of undecided voters. So I think it's still a horse race.
It could be a complex thing. Jeff Ranford brought up on our show last week that you're going to have if you have a contested convention, most of us have never seen that.
That is true.
And the news media's never, and you've never seen it with a reality TV star as
right,
the person involved in it. It might drown out a lot of the messaging that would go on normally in a primary.
Well, that's right.
In July. Maybe that advantage Peter, I guess?
Well, that is a good point. I think it would. That kind of media coverage could drown out some of the paid messaging.
Let's talk about some of these statewide races. You serve with a lot of the people on the ballot.
Right.
The lieutenant governor's race.
Sure.
Are you involved in that? How do you see that coming out?
Sure. Well, I think Eric Schmidt got a much earlier start, has a lot more money in the bank.
He's running for treasurer. You endorsed Senator Schmidt, right?
I did endorse him early before Dan Brown was in the race. Dan's a good friend as well.
I guess Dan endorsed him too.
Dan endorsed him too. So in any case, I suspect Eric wins that one, but yeah, both are good friends.
In the lieutenant governor's race, you've got 2 Republican candidates. One you serve with in Senator Parson.
Sure, Senator Parson.
Where do you see that coming down to?
Yeah, that's a good question. Once again, 2 good friends, so I'm staying out of that one.
I sense you might think that's closer than others would think, right?
Perhaps. I think it might be closer. Once again, in these down ticket races, in a year where there's so much other media noise going on, it might come down to Mike Parson, having been a longtime public servant, having more name ID.
The right to farm stuff's got to help.
The right to farm stuff. He's traveled the state just a couple of years ago. So I would, if I had to handicap it, I would bet Parson. But I think Bev Randles is running a good race too. I haven't made an endorsement in that one either. Both are good friends.
AG's race. It's already hot, right?
Yeah, that is a hot race. I have endorsed my Senate colleague, Kurt Schaefer, and I think that's a hot one. I think that could go either way.
Speaking of the Kurt Schaefer, you were on the Sanctity of Life Committee, right?
I was.
Active.
I was.
The Planned Parenthood folks, you had the Attorney General, the Democrats nominee for governor, say there's no crime here. And then you had somebody take the 5th last week. Was that surprising or?
That was a little surprising. It kind of reminded you of a Godfather movie and Michael Corleone taking the 5th. So I don't know what they're hiding there, Scott.
Well, there were folks that said that was a political witch hunt. Well, political witch
Not
hunts
at all.
don't end with people taking the fifth.
That
It
exactly
validates a lot of your work.
That is exactly right. I do not think we know what is going on with baby body parts at that Planned Parenthood facility or at the pathology services. We know.
Do you think you will know?
Well, one thing we do know for sure is that some of the baby body part remains are going on to a facility in Indiana where they're being disposed of illegally.
Does
Indiana
it boil down
company,
to now you need an attorney general willing to pursue it?
that would be very
the
helpful.
Senate is limited in what you can do now, right?
That would be very helpful, and Attorney General Schaefer, I'm sure, will do a great job of that.
Let's talk a couple of more things. With Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, there's some that believe you could have another washout like in '92. Do you think Trump drags the ticket down, and do you think that some of these campaigns, they're raising money at an unprecedented clip? I think Senator Schmidt has over $2 million on hand.
Right.
Do you think you can inoculate yourself if it begins to go south?
You know, it's hard to say what the Trump phenomenon does for me. I've endorsed Senator Ted Cruz for a lot of reasons, one of which is I think he is more electable than Donald Trump. But at the same time, you point out that Donald Trump has brought some swing voters into the party who traditionally haven't voted Republican. So I'm not really sure what the net effect
You're
of
one of the leading
Donald
conservatives in this state. Do you believe conservative voters will turn out and vote for Trump? Do you believe they'll turn out anyway and just not vote for him? Do you believe he can pull voters that vote for you and look up to you and look for your endorsement? Can he win them over?
I think he can. I think given the choice between Hillary Clinton and any Republican nominee, I believe we can get out the voters for the Republican nominee and win the election. Too much is at stake.
Senator Onder, thank you for
Scott.
hosting us here in your
Thank
office
you very
in the Capitol.
much.
Appreciate it.
Great to be on. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in from our special broadcast from the state capitol this week. I want to also thank, congratulations to everyone who was selected for the Missouri Times 30 Under 30. You can check that out at MissouriTimes.com, and we'll see you next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.